So, Fridays I've been talking to you about feet, and we've been going numerically. And the last foot I did was number 4, zipper foot. But I'm skipping ahead to number 10 because we just launched the Kimberbell fill in the blank, which is this super cute little bunny basket. So this one's not finished. So maybe like that other time I came to class on Friday and finished my sample. So we are going to talk about the number 10 foot today. Edge stitch foot. Many other brands have an edge stitch foot. So again, most often the business end of a foot is found on the bottom. So what I want to point out is there's nothing showing in the hole here. And your number 5 looks a lot like this. So, but on the number 5, and we'll get back to that soon, this kind of center blade that you're seeing, this one here, it actually travels all the way through on a number 5 foot. So they look very similar from the top, but they are not similar in function. There's a couple things that each one shares with the other, and when I get to the number 5, we'll make it a little more obvious there for you why how they're different. So I just knew when I got started here that the number 10 foot would be my favorite to do the things I need to do for this little project. And I thought, well, great, we'll share that with you, because I know a few people bought a few kits because they were super adorable. And I'll share a few tips with you today how to maximize your kits. If you are careful, and I was a bit careful, you're able to get the majority of your pieces. There's a lovely aqua sparkly cuddle in the kit. Let's try this view. There's this really sweet pink cuddle, so you got furry little bunnies. There's enough of the Kimberbell glitter sheets to get umpteen little eggs. There's 2 colors in the kit. You can see he's got spots on him. It might not show so well on the camera, but it's little silver sparkles, but they're not scratchy or crunchy. They're soft like he is. But if you're not following your instructions super carefully, if you're not really reading it and you're sort of going by the diagram but not completely, what's happening, people are putting their bunnies on in the way that you would think the bunny should go on the bag, right? With the handles at the top here, the bunny standing upright. However, these bunnies need to go on what we would essentially consider upside down. So the feet of the bunnies should be up here towards the hem of the bag. So that's sort of not a big, super big warning there that tells you, hey, watch out. You want to get your bunnies on upside down here. So there's a few people who've had a couple little issues perhaps. So that's my way up in step 1 or 2, lining up your bunnies. Take note, you are putting them on what feels like upside down. Okay, so I'll show you what the bunny looks like correctly done. Bring that over for you. So there's a correctly done bunny. feels super wrong to hoop and stitch that, or if you're making this in a sewing version, because there's instructions in the free designs to do this manually by hand or digitally on your embroidery machine. There's some good instructions about how to place this in your hoop. There's a great placement line, and they show you the same kind of placement lines for doing it manually. Now the interesting thing here is how this bag goes together. And so if you've got your instructions out and you're kind of wondering where I am, I'm already on page 14-15 of the embroidery instructions, or I think it's page 10 through 12 on the hand sewing one. Let's just change our view a little bit for you. I don't want you to miss a thing. So, first instruction, super simple. From the top of the bag here down to 6 inches, you're going to make a mark. I've done just a little mark with a blue water-soluble pen. Easy to get rid of later. If you want to use a fading marker, you can. All right, then we're going to fold the handle down the bag. That seems a bit interesting and odd. I'm just going to put a little pin to hold it in place there. The other thing I want to tell you is don't get too hung up about the bag and the handles. I've seen some customer comments. They're really upset about the handles. You know, it's a very inexpensive canvas bag made in a factory. You have to cut it some slack. But what I would do is I would put my 6-inch seam gauge up against the handle here, and then move my slider to wherever the edge of the bag is, so that I get this handle on straight. Eyeballing in this instance might not be your friend. And I'm just going to pin this. All right, so the steps here. Well, it's kind of difficult maybe to see on camera, but here's the stitches. They're quite big. And the instructions ask you to increase your stitch length, or, you know, the hint is to make the thread match the top stitch thread that they've used. That's really important to make this hide. Then you also want to increase your stitch length so that it's similar to what this is, so it doesn't change stitch length from here then up into the handle. I started with about a 3.5. What we're going to do is actually top stitch this handle in place. And using the number 10 foot's your friend. Now it's really thick down here. It's thicker on this side than on this side because the seam allowance of the strap is over here. So I'm going to start on this side. And what I'm going to do, let's take a look at the top of the machine here. Most Berninas will have these icons or physical buttons. We're going to move the needle over. So on my screen, you can see it says I did -2, which is in 2 positions to the left. And when you're looking down here, hopefully you can make out the needle is normally here in the center, but I've moved it over, and I think on this side I might even move it 1 more position. Did you see the needle jump? So I'm going 1 more because I want it right on top of that original stitching, and then we're going to top stitch this handle down, and We want it to look like what's there currently. And I started, I don't know, about a 1/4 inch in, and then I'm going to back up. And just take your time. There's not a lot of stitching here, so there's no point in rushing through it. The reason I'm using the number 10 is that little blade here is going to keep me riding straight along the edge. And then the needle's that 3 positions to the left now, and it's going to land right on top of this stitching. And that's what we want. So the blade's going to help me keep nice and even with the edge, keep some straight top stitching there. So this is where the term edge stitching comes in, because I'm doing an edge stitch. So as I get close to the blue line, that's where I'm going to stop. So I'm going to just stitch up to the blue line and then do a little back, and then cut, knot, whatever you like. Now remember I said that this side is very, very thick. All the seam allowances here. So you can see how much thinner it is on the right than it is here on the left. I'm going to sew towards that instead of starting here and going in, because if you know the term high centering, you can get high centered on your foot and it won't roll for you. So I've got that blade lined up to the edge. I'm just checking the positioning of my needle so I stitch right on top of those original stitches. And these, just so you know, you're going to check this each and every time, because on some of the bags the top stitching isn't even, or as even as it could be. Don't let it ruin your day. Just do the best you can with what you have. I'm happy with that needle position, I think. So then we're just going to sew forward on this, and now we're getting all of this bulk. There's a height compensation tool in most Berninas. Some of you have bought one over the years, called a hump jumper or Gina-majig, those sorts of things. We'll do that as an in-depth accessory, but not today. Today, I'm going to assume you don't have one, and how are we going to get through here? Well, you just go slow and make sure it continues to move. I like to stitch to the end, and then I'm going to back on. And if it doesn't like it, sometimes lifting your foot and then moving the fabric, the stitch length, can be your friend. Patience is the key here. So I've got that one strap sewn in place. I'm going to tip that other one up. Let's just pull back so you can see. Remember, so this side, you see my seam gauge is where it was for the other side. It's not the same place on this side. Don't let it bug you. Just move the gauge to where the edge of the bag is. We can only work with what we got. You can wish all day you had different or better, but better to get this little Easter busket. That's what they're calling it. Easter busket. Busket. B-U-S. So then I'm just going to pin in there to hold that in place. And then if you want to not tie off each time, we can sew down this side over that bulky part. We can go across the bottom and up. So that's one pass, not two. So that means I'm going to move my needle to the right side because I'm going to use the inside of the blade. Let me give you a close up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start up here where everything's flatter and thinner. I'm going to sew down over this thickness, go across the end, and then back up this side, ending here. That way I only have to tie off twice instead of 4 times. So what we'll do is just drop that foot. Now where I'm measuring from is the inside of the blade, and I just need to move the needle into position on top of that original stitching. I had a little knot there, but I'm also going to add a little back stitch. So you can see now I'm following the edge on this side of the blade. And that was just simply by moving the needle. And for those of you who have bought an awl like I've got, this is the places I use it instead of my finger, because I can get really close to everything without jeopardizing a finger. So you can see perhaps the high centering that could happen there. You can see the toes here are really pointed high, and the back could be grinding down into the bag. We're gonna just make sure that we don't get high centered. And if it feels like it's stuck or stopping, stop, lift the foot, readjust. So the other way, I did a back stitch here at the edge. I'm just gonna pivot here and sew across the end. Swing the bag around. Is that little bit down at the bottom is going to be hidden under some trim in a moment. And I'm just going to check my needle position. It is sewing right where I want it to on this side, so I don't have to adjust it. But you might, on one of the bags I made, I had to adjust. Each side of the strap was not necessarily top stitched in the same spot. So as I come up here, remember you're going to stop at that marking, which was 6 inches from the top, but that's all in the instructions, so don't panic. I don't have to remember a thing. Alrighty. So now the handle's sort of in the middle of the bag, which feels a bit weird. This is the bottom of the bag now. So hopefully that, now that you've seen it flip, that makes a little more sense when you dig those instructions out. Then the next part is there's some lovely trim. You can see it's a crocheted edge. It's got some holes there in the bottom you can see through. I'm going to put it where I was told, which is across the bottom of the bag here. And what I did was I lined up the edge of the ribbon to the edge of the bag. If you can see the bag through the crocheted holes, you need to move it a little bit. I'm going to put the needle back into center position. I just simply used the clear function, which took all those settings I put in a minute ago out, and it moved the needle. So where I'm stitching is the edge of the ribbon. I'm using this blade to follow the edge of the ribbon. If you're a little bit nervous about being so close to the edge, you can move the needle one position into the ribbon, and for sure you'll catch everything. So all I'm doing here is watching that the edge of the ribbon is on the bottom edge of the bag. Watching here, a lot of times people who have difficulty keeping things straight when there isn't a drawn line or something, they're not really sure where to look. We're looking here. We're never looking at the needle except for maybe in the very first stitch to be sure we have it placed where we need it. And then we switch to something more permanent because the needle's now going up and down. If you can watch that, oh, power to you. It would make most people nauseous. Okay, so that big bump is giving me a little grief here and I'm stuck. So how would I deal with this? Remember I said lift the foot and it just lets me sew again because it kind of got stuck on the foot. But I just, by lifting the foot and putting it back down, it just kind of resettled itself into a more sewable position. Every now and then you have to take a fake stitch manually, but I didn't that time. So we're going to sew that ribbon here. And rather than coming back out, I'm going to just turn, I'm going to sew up the edge of the bag, which isn't necessarily the edge of the ribbon. Then I'm going to pivot, and I've got the blade right here on the edge of that ribbon. Again, just below the crochet. And sometimes coming towards a hump is a little more easy. It's a little easier. Not always, but sometimes. So I feel it's not quite happy, but it's still moving. So still making nice stitches. Didn't have to do anything fancy to get over that hump. Just took my time. Because I've measured and timed some of this stuff. I can tell you that if it took 3 minutes to put it in, it takes 9 minutes to unpick it. So you can kind of see that foot riding high. You may get stuck here. But this is also where sometimes I'll put my stiletto here and I will apply a little bit of pressure. And I'm stuck, so I'm just going to lift the foot. Apply a little bit of pressure. No danger to my fingers. And just walk that through. It's totally worth doing this slowly, correctly, once the first time. All right, so now we have ribbon stitched to the bottom. That used to be the top. That's the tricky thing here. The top is now the bottom. The top of the bag is kind of here in the middle of the sack. And then I had already finished this other side here. And just so you're aware, Kimberbell instructions are fabulous. You don't necessarily need my help very often with these things, but today I thought we would discuss the number 10 foot. We have, in my head, we have a few minutes, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the next steps, because we can. The instructions are pretty good here. When you're finished, you're going to fold this bag up. We're going to sew the seams just along from the fold here to what was the top, but it's now the bottom. They could have called this the topsy-turvy basket for sure. So you would sew up the side seams and then you were going to box the bottom. The instructions that Kim's got in here are fabulous. They usually are. Now, a couple tips. If you're a confident sewer like I am, I didn't even pin this. But the problem is a lot of people will stretch this. They'll pinch it and pull it while they're sewing. Stretching it, potentially twisting it. And sometimes pins are not your friend. A lot of blood could ensue. This is where I would use this one. In the Patch Designs patch stick, you can glue that ribbon in place. Put a few little blobs in there as you go. It's lovely, keeps it flat. No blood will ensue if you get your finger caught on a pin. And for anything that you're going to wash later, this will wash out in the first wash. And my friend Phyllis, she does a lot of wool. She uses it in her wool applique. It's lovely. Don't forget, use the right kind of glue. A wash-away glue is your friend. Now, what if you jumped ahead on those instructions? Let's take a look at that. So we got all excited. We got our bunnies on there. We got them right side up to the original bag, but they're not the right bag for the directions. So the rest of the directions won't be your friend. Well, let's just make a tote bag, and we can do some fun stuff to it. You can switch to a different kind of foot for sewing, but you can just sew normally with the number 10 foot. I'm going to kind of give myself, let's go up to the foot. Let's take you there. So I like to start in and back up to the edge. So let's back up to the edge and then go forward. You have less gems at the beginning then. I'm using about a 1/2 inch seam here. Just keep those edges nice and even. Remember, I said sometimes the people in the factories, they don't really have any invested interest in what happens to you at the end. So if things aren't quite flat, aren't quite straight, do the best you can with what you have. So I've just done a 1/2 inch seam on the bag here. Nothing super fancy. And you can see there was a bit of a wow on that piece of fabric. I just let it wow. I laid everything flat and let it have its way. So here's the bottom fold and that seam allowance. I'm just going to finger press this a bit. Then I'm going to pick this up. So I've got that fold. I'm going to take that fold and I'm going to open the bottom of the bag out. And what I'm looking for is that fold line that I can still see and the seam line here that I can feel. I'm going to open that seam allowance up, and with my fingers I'm going to walk through here, and I can feel the seam underneath that fold. And when I have it right at the top here, I'll get this nice little double teepee thing going on. And then just to secure it, I'm going to pop a pin in here. And I'm just going to feel my way through there. It's called boxing the bottom. So what we've done is we've kind of made this nice triangle. And with a water-soluble marker, air erase marker, pencil, we're going to put a mark. Grab my handy-dandy ruler, whoops. And what we're going to do, if you can't see this line, we can flip over because we can see this line. What we're going to do is use one of the straight lines here. I am going to go from the point of the bag to the end of the ruler, 2.5 inches. Keeping this straight here, and then I'm just going to trace that line. Oh, nope, it's working. For a second I thought I grabbed a dry marker. You know how that goes. And I'm going to mark this big triangle off so that we're making a more shaped sack. Let's head back to the needle. Often, how I do these, just for security and so I don't have big lumpy back tacks, I start in the middle. And what I do is I sew out to that edge, and now see, I can use that blade to follow that line I marked. And I've got, you want to stop just 1 point in from the edge. And I'm going to pivot. So there's no back stitching at these corners, they'll lie flatter. So use the blade, follow the mark you just made. I'm going all the way back across the middle where I started. I'm going to go to this end. You stop with the needle just on the edge of the bag, and then I'm going to sew all the way to the middle. And I'm not going to do any back stitching because the whole thing is double stitched. All right, so I'm just going to back up a little bit. I'm going to take that pin out that was just holding it in place for me and kind of show you what's happened here. So now I'm going to turn the bag. I've only done one corner, but hopefully it shows you the two different bottoms. Let me just turn it. Okay, so I've turned the bag around, and you know, standard tote bag, we've just got that kind of weird, it's all flat and to the bottom, so kind of a book baggy thing. But now see on this side, I've got like those brown lunch bags, I've got a base when I boxed that corner. So what happens is it makes the bag a little bit shorter. So by bringing that bottom, oops, sorry you guys, bringing the bottom up, it shortens the side. Hopefully this is a little easier to see. But even if you started out, got excited, and you put the bunnies on the wrong way around, you still have a really cute little Easter bag, book bag, fun bag, in case you're doing card drops for Easter. But you can see, gives that base. So whatever matches. So you can see the side, we now have kind of that squarish lunch bag thing, where if we didn't do that, we have kind of that long, flat tote bag, right? I like the box side. So even if you got all excited and you didn't properly follow the directions and put your bunnies on upside down, it's just a different bag. Be kind, be calm, and for goodness sake, be safe. We're coming out. People are getting their vaccine appointments. Do get vaccinated. Take care. I'm going to sign off, and we'll see you next week. Bye.